What is brandOdyssey? Welcome to the world of brandOdyssey. Right, we've been talking a lot about different things about consumers and whatnot, and I've mentioned brandOdyssey along the way. But what is brandOdyssey? Right? brandOdyssey is a way of thinking about people, not just consumers, but people as well, and thinking about the way that we people relate to all of the objects that are around us. And when I use that word object very loosely, right? Other things, other people, whatever. How we relate to technology, right? How we relate to brands, how we relate to products, how we relate to organisations, how we relate to political parties, how we relate to each other. brandOdyssey is about deciphering those meanings. The goal of a brandOdyssey project is to decipher these real, often hidden meanings and relationships, right? That we have with the world of products and brands and people around us. Right? This is a crucial step, right? And this is why I love to use the word diagnosis. Right? We don't just collect information and report on it. We diagnose. We collect information to diagnose that relationship, because that relationship, most of it, is hidden. We can't actually see it and we can't talk about it. So we need to diagnose it. That word diagnosis is very, very important. I know it's a term used in medicine, but it means exactly the same thing. Diagnosis means using symptoms to try and understand the root cause of what's going on. Now, our business has forgotten that word diagnosis. You know, the information that we collect, even the emotional information that we collect, is but a symptom. We need to collect all of those symptoms, sit down, look at them, analyse them, and diagnose basically what's going on, right? Now, that's the first issue. I mean, that's a challenge in itself. It's very possible, but it's a challenge in itself. The second thing is that once we understand that diagnosis, and if it's a really good diagnosis, right, then really the whole future starts to pan out in quite a clear way. Right? Once we understand why something is happening, we know what will happen in the future. Right? The past, the present, and the future exist in an eternal present. Once we understand why something is happening now, we can understand the future. That's the power of the diagnosis. And that's why brandOdyssey is very, very consumer-centric. I know we all say that, right? We say, you know, 1 foot in the, one foot in the boardroom, 1 foot on the street or whatever, yeah? We all say we're consumer-centric, but we're not really consumer-centric. We're focused, too much on marketing and too much on answers, basically, right? So, if you're looking at this, if you've come here waiting to hear, a lot of marketing speak and a lot of marketing jargon and lingo, then I think you're in the wrong place, because I don't really even know that much marketing jargon or lingo myself, because for what I do, it's not really that important, right? What I do and what my clients, commission me to understand is to diagnose that relationship, to give them certain insights that they themselves are not going to be generating on their own, right? In their own marketing discussions or simply from their own intuition. That's what we do. It's not necessarily to be marketers, it is to supply marketing with diagnoses so they can make terrific decisions, right? And when I say that the consumer is the most important person to your business as a marketer, I don't just mean it from the obvious sense that, they supply the money, they buy your product, and therefore they supply the money to your organisation. It's not that at all. They're the most important people to your organisation, because the future of what you make is actually contained within the consumer. The consumer is the repository, right, of really everything there is to know about your product. Right? This is why the consumer is very important. This is why brandOdyssey is 100% consumer-centric in the true sense of the word, right? So, brandOdyssey is dedicated to making the invisible or the unconscious visible and real to marketers, because that's where your future is, right? But it's not obvious, right? The future or the invisible might be staring at us, but we can't actually see it all of the time. So brandOdyssey is about articulating the future of a product, the brand, technology, service, or an organisation, right? We have to find this out. We have to dig into the unconscious area of the consumer mind, if that's what you want to call it, if that's where the unconscious exists, in order to find that out. But just to make it absolutely clear, what are the things that brandOdyssey does? I'll just quickly illustrate 6 things that it does, right? Number 1 is to establish the emotional imprint of a product or a brand. Now, we'll be discussing what this is later on, but to establish the emotional imprint of a product or brand or organisation or whatever, right? This is key. The other thing we need to do, the other thing brandOdyssey does is establish what we call the relevant moral codes. Now, there is a moral To every organisation, there's a moral to every story, as they say, right? There's a moral to every story. Every good story has a moral tale. And a brand, right, or something that we perceive is nothing more than a story, right? Remember, there's no reality, it's just perception, right? And that perception is nothing more than a story, right? So implicit in a lot of the things that we do is this moral structure, and brandOdyssey understands or brings to life that moral code. A moral code can be culturally specific, or it can be much broader in scope. Some morals are actually endemic to being a human being. Some morals or some morality is very culturally specific. And I'll talk about it again in detail later on. The other thing we also need to do is accurately identify and measure. Because brandOdyssey isn't just a qualitative process, there's a quantitative process involved as well when necessary, and it's about identifying and measuring specific and what we call contextually based needs. Right? Both in a mind share sense and in a behavioural sense. So we measure needs in the sense of to what extent do they exist in the consumer perception, but then we also measure those needs in terms of how they expressed in day-to-day behaviour in a particular context. The other thing that brandOdyssey realises is that the consumer in most cases is not a static being. We are not one thing all the time. And in fact, as the fragmentation of the market continues and as we continue to evolve as consumers, we actually take on different kinds of personalities. So, or have different needs in different situations. So when we measure needs, we don't just measure these, a consumer has this one need. Look, there are some categories where this might be the case, but generally we have different needs in different situations. So number 3 was identifying and measuring specific and contextually based needs, and often multiple needs, of course, from within the same consumer. Very importantly, to understand and to measure how well specific brands and products deliver to particular needs, right? Again, both in a mind share sense, right? Which products are perceived to meet certain needs, and then which products are actually used to meet needs as well. So by measuring, again, measuring behaviour, measuring need, these are the two extremes that we need to understand, because it's the extremes that set the boundary of the story that we're going to talk about for the marketing client. From that, we create new ideas for products or services. We do not predict the future, right? Okay, we do not predict the future. We're not soothsayers, but we do create pathways for ideas for products and services by examining the unconscious of the present. And finally, the other thing we do is we assess concepts, advertising ideas, actual advertising in relation to all of those things that we've understood about the category in question, the brand code or the moral code or the needs. So I'm not in favour of what we call testing concepts, right? Again, there are very efficient, cheap instruments to measure whether we like a concept or not, right? Online measurement, a few minutes, in a questionnaire, people will tell you, do I like it? Do I really like it? Do I like it strongly? Whatever. They will tick those boxes and send them back. That is a much more cost-effective and quick and more accurate way to measure whether people say they like something or not. But as we know, liking isn't everything. In fact, sometimes in advertising, liking isn't even the issue at all. But it's not what people like and they say they want, it's what they actually need. And brandOdyssey assesses ideas, concepts, advertising, etc. in relation to what people actually need. But we need to understand what those needs are in the first place.